Well, hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us online on Facebook tonight for building community while social distancing. Pastor Brian, joined by Pastor Lance and his beautiful home decorated his wife. Hey, Lance, how are you?
Doing great, doing great.
All right. And we're joined tonight by our missional communities coordinator, Heather Johnson. Glad that you are with us as well. And I am hearing myself in my own background.
So happy to see
So,
everybody.
hi, Heather. All right. Well, so we're talking tonight about building community while social distancing. Obviously, this is a weird situation that we're in, where all of a sudden we can't get together with other people. I think it's been pretty remarkable so far to see kind of how we as a society have tried to still continue to create community, and we're going to talk about some ways that we can continue to do that tonight. I think it's interesting, even here at Bridgeway. Just for those of you watching, if you're looking to find a community, you can go to bridgeway.church and then click find your community, and there are online discussion groups and online classes that are meeting, so you can check those out. But kind of the purpose of this webinar is we just want to talk through, okay, what are some ways that we can be very intentional about building community and not isolating in the midst of this time where we can't physically be together. So we're going to start, Lance, with you, and you've got some kind of big ideas and some themes that you want to share, and then Heather, you'll kind of chime in along the way with some of your ideas, and you're the one who's got kind of all the great examples of how this is working itself out at Bridgeway. So and then I've got a few different thoughts on this as well. So Lance, why don't you go ahead and start us off? Share with us, let's start with a couple of practical principles, couple of practical tools we can utilize to build community while we're social distancing.
Yeah, so I think for me, correct me if I'm wrong here, Pastor Brian, but we're going to be talking about some of these helpful tips, right? Is that what we're going to be talking about? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So unlike a lot of you that may be watching this, a lot of my community is much more official in capacity, meaning that you guys are my world. There we go. That's what I'm trying to say, is that I have my family who's here in the home with me, and my extended family, which there's a few of them here in this area, but not very many. And then my church is my family. This is my friend group. And what's intriguing about that is all my friends are kind of looped in around church stuff. So I also operate as the CEO and president and senior pastor where all my friends are, which is a little bit of an oddity. So what that does, it makes a lot of my community about meetings, about official connections. So I'll get a chance to touch base with Miss Heather or Pastor Brian at meetings, normally at church. And that's when we hang out and we talk about what's going on in our lives. And well, in this capacity, we do the same exact thing. So for me, community meant getting a little bit more of a formal setup so I could be with my friends. You would not have to go to something this extreme, but for me, I have a workstation on my counter, and later on I'll post it up on my Facebook page, just kind of the funny silliness of what it looks like on the other side. I have two massive photography lamps that are shining on me right now. And I have my laptop up on top of all these books. Literally, they're just books that I'm reading for my doctoral program that could topple over at any time. So it's funny that for me, it's this idea of what's the background like and how to. So for me, organizing for community still had a lot to do with meetings online, had a lot to do with a bit more formality than most of you would have to deal with. So thankfully, though, because of that, I did set up this whole system so that if I do need to get on very quickly with my friends, I can absolutely do so.
Awesome. Okay. Well, so that's, I mean, I think that is a bit of a uniqueness in that you're able to move kind of pretty quickly to have a lot of what you do sort of in regular time, move that online pretty quickly. Now, for those who maybe this sense of having to be isolated in this regard is a little bit different, what are some practical tips and some pointers that you could give to people that are in kind of that situation?
Yeah. So let's see. I guess I would say and I'm trying to figure out what parts you wanted to hit, Pastor Brian, first. But I think that really what you're getting to, unless you want me to get into all the heavier big stuff, is that what you're thinking of?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I mean, I think that you have some ideas sort of behind this, but maybe I should have phrased the question a little differently. Before we get to the practical stuff, maybe
Yeah.
you talk about, okay, kind of big picture, how should we go about even thinking about some of these types of issues?
Yeah, now that's something for sure I've definitely done a lot of thinking about. So I would say this. So, in scripture, biblically speaking, it talks about our neighbor, right? Who's our neighbor? Who should we be in contact? Well, I was thinking about that just as I was preparing for this, and I was thinking, well, man, our neighbor just changed. Now we have to have people that we have access through social media to. I don't necessarily have the social media stuff of my physical neighbors outside my house. My neighborhood just shifted on me. And when that happens, for those of us that are extroverts, we kind of have a drive and desire to go meet other people and find ways to find other people. But for those of us that are introverted, it's really tempting to say that's too much work. If I can't do it easily, I may just hunker down into a bunker mentality, right? This idea of, man, until everything calms down, I'm just going to stay to myself. What I would really caution against is that spirit, because it is critical in the human condition that we are with each other, that we have some type of contact, some voices outside of our own heads. It has a factor to do with anxiety and a factor to do with depression. And it has an anxiety that's kind of built in underneath it all when we're all by ourselves and we're just like an echo chamber in our head. So here's kind of what I was thinking as I prepared this, is that when you have a brand new neighborhood, you can't connect to everyone. So for example, when we would come into church, we would kind of have the same place that we sat. We had certain people that were around us. When we went into our office or our workspace, we had certain offices that were near us. We kept passing Bob on the way to the coffee place, that kind of thing. And that was all accidental bumping into people. And you kind of had a routine and a rhythm of how many people you interacted with during a day. Well, now this has to be designed. There's no accidental bumping into people. So in order to design that, we really have this feeling of how do I contact everybody? And then you kind of freeze up because there's no way you can't talk to everybody.
Right.
And so what I want to encourage everyone to do is start thinking through some of the key relationships in your life that I think we all have different people that we're best talking to on email, some people that we're best talking to on text, some people we're best talking to on the phone, which, by the way, outside of my wife, kids, and my mom, I don't really talk to a whole lot of people on the phone anymore. I'm always texting or email or it's in person. And so you start sifting, who would I get on the computer with? Who would I FaceTime? And when you do that, we need to make a list of people in our lives that we are doing a pretty consistent check-in with, right? And one of the ways I would encourage all of us to do that is to think through a godly lens about who gets first priority. Because if we spend all of our time just hanging out and talking to the one person that we always laugh with, I'm not so sure we're taking full advantage of the opportunity that we have right here, which is reaching out to some that are vulnerable, making sure that the older folks in our life are taken care of and ministered to. Are we doing good contact with our families? Are we able to specifically contact those in our sphere of influence just to say, how are you doing? Are you doing good? This is a time for deeper connection, and I just would hate for us to miss that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. And I think it's interesting too, how it's almost like right now, it's like you don't need an excuse to contact somebody, right?
Right.
Because just the sense of, hey, just wanted to check in and see how you're doing is all of a sudden, whereas that might be a little odd on a normal Thursday, it's very kind of normal now, right? Because we're all kind of in this together and we're all sort of dealing with the same thing. Heather, what are your thoughts on this? How have you seen that sort of a mentality play out, either kind of in your life or just in the circles that you're in?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you were talking, Lance, one of the things I was thinking about was the very first thing we did was just adapt kind of all the relationships we already had. We just had to to pivot, really. I mean, it's like, okay, well, these are all of our established relationships. Now, what does that look like now to engage with them? And family, everybody was already in the house. I mean, I have a more full house now than I did before. I'm loving it. So, but for those outside of our family, we just had to get really creative. I feel like the first thing we did was figured out how to Zoom, and we started Zooming with our missional community, and we set up a Zoom for all the families together. We set up a Zoom for the teens so that they had a room that they could meet in. And it was awkward and it was challenging to figure out how to learn it, and it was kind of funny, but we did it, and we were so glad that we did. That the friends that didn't want to Zoom, we FaceTimed with. They didn't feel comfortable with that. So it's like, okay, fine, you pivot. We can set up a FaceTime screen and the coffee table and be goofy with some of our closer friends, and the family and the different people that we had that didn't feel comfortable with either of those. Shoot, we just picked up a phone. And I mean, a lot of the people I've been talking to, we've talked on the phone more in the last week than I have in the last 5 years. I mean, it's just all of a sudden a rediscovery of the phone. It's like, oh, these are really meaningful conversations, and I really didn't like the phone before. And now it's like, oh, this amazing tool called the phone, because it's connection, and we're using what we've got.
So you mean to tell me that you can use a phone for actually making calls?
Believe it or not, yes, it's a
Wow,
rediscovery.
wow. Yeah, wow. That's a revelation for me. So, okay, so Lance, I think I want to talk about kind of there's an issue I want to address, and I want to talk about it kind of more broadly, and then I want to talk about it specifically as it pertains to Bridgeway and this particular time that we're in, and then those who are part of the Bridgeway community. So, broadly speaking, the church has often thrived in really challenging situations. That when various types of oppression or societal situations or economic situations or global, whatever, have caused a lot of challenges for the population at large. That's really when the church has stepped up and really thrived. What kind of examples of that could you share, or why is that such a big deal for us to remember in this time where we're facing this weird situation that none of us expected?
Well, here's what's super bizarre about it. Indeed, the church has gotten stronger. I think if you're in church for very long, all the greatest stories about how the underground church in this nation or the underground church in this nation, they forged together and they would do anything to be together, and that they had different ways of communicating, but they never wanted to be away from godliness and from good community. Well, all that was usually under what we would consider persecution, right? Where there was an outside agency trying to shut it down. What's so fascinating about this is when the persecution hits, it ends up shoving everybody into their homes isolated, which is exactly where we're at right now. We're not facing a persecution in America. We are facing an external force that is demanding the exact same reality, which is now suddenly we're in homes and we're isolated and we're not allowed to get together. That same process is happening here without the threat of an external force that would be attacking the church per se, but it's an external force that would be attacking the human body. So once again, without the persecution, we have the same environment. But here's what I want to remind everybody. It's that not only does the church thrive in persecution, but when there's limitations. So let me give you this crazy example. I remember growing up in the 80s, and I grew up in the Assembly of God denomination. And so from my earliest memories, I remember being told about a pastor named David and Paul Yonggi Cho. They were in South Korea in Seoul. And they created a church, which is actually called the Uido Full Gospel Church. It's an Assembly of God church over there. Now, it was founded, and I know you guys, once again, I'm a history guy, right? So I had to go back and figure this stuff out. It was founded in 1958. And in the late 60s, they had 8,000 people in their church. Now, you have to remember, this is before any of the mega church movement. That actually didn't launch till the late 90s, mid to late 90s. They had 8,000 people. And the pastor ended up doing so many services to try to get everybody in, his health failed. And so he said, I can't do this anymore. So they broke the whole city of Seoul, Korea into zones. And he said, you're only going to meet in small groups. You're only going to meet in, well, that's where we got the idea of cell groups. You're only going to meet in tiny little environments. And so all 8,000 people kind of got broken up. Well, in 1977, it had grown to 50,000 people. In 1981, it went to 200,000 people. In 1983, they expanded their sanctuary to seat 12,000 people at a time, and it still wasn't enough. They started satellite churches all around the city. In 1992, it was 700,000 people in one church. In 2007, it was 830,000 people, and they were doing 17 different languages. Well, it's kind of shrunk down. As of 2020, it's listing 480,000 members. Imagine a church shrinking to 480,000 members. Now, here's my point in all that. When we talk about, oh, what's the church going to do and how should they dynamically work with this? The largest church in the world has to function just like this. They can't fit anybody in all their things, so they don't ever meet all together. Their entire church reality is this. And obviously with technology, this got a lot easier. So anyway, I just wanted to encourage everybody that, listen, the church always adapts, but we are really good at adapting because it's about relationships, and relationships are able to adapt.
Yeah, that's certainly true. And then I think from that, we'll start back with you, Lance, on this question, but maybe Heather, if you could chime in on this as well after Lance here. I think that with new challenges come new opportunities for growth, right? In the same manner that the church in South Korea had to adapt to some new realities and make some adjustments and make some changes. This change, even though we pray and expect, obviously, for it to be temporary, this change brings with it opportunities for us to grow. Just even looking at our church, our Bridgeway, there are opportunities for us to grow in this, and maybe ways that the Lord might want to call us to some growth through this kind of opportunity and situation that we're in. So what would be some growth opportunities that you see in this for us as Bridgeway? And then we'll start with you, Lance, and then go to you, Heather.
Yeah, so I got four that popped up in my head right away, which is, and now I'm thinking much more as a leader in the church, much more as a senior pastor or a pastoral member, because when I look out at our congregation, as I said, that is my family. And I think about, how does my family need to thrive, and what hurdles or obstacles are in their way? And I found that in this time, God ended up addressing four that were on my heart already. And there was no way I could really get through to all of us to make these necessary changes. So let me give you a couple of these. Number one, getting beyond busyness. I still have said, since the moment I got into church work, I was a senior pastor. Now it's going on almost 23 years at Bridgeway Christian Church. I have never had a more difficult foe than busyness. It has been the number one thing that has shut down discipleship. It's the number one thing that shuts down evangelism. It's the number one thing that curtails connection with God, is busyness. And I can't force that on anybody. All of a sudden, this scenario brought everything to a grinding halt. When you start talking to somebody about what does it mean to have solitude and silence before the Lord? Hello. Right? When you start talking about to everybody and saying, you might need to spend some time with your family, some quality time where there's no distractions. Ta-da! Right? So the second thing that I felt like we needed to do was that I always crave that we would have our focus on what's important. And what I mean by that is, now all of a sudden, health is important, family is important, and faith is important. Before, we had so many options of entertainment and so many options outside of ourselves that it was hard to keep the important things, right? Number three, I felt like a lot of us were following the same trends of the United States, which is we only went to church once every 3 to 4 weeks. And I felt like there wasn't quite an appreciation of being together. Well, wow, I am really craving hugging people. I am really craving being together. And I feel like when this breaks loose, I mean, the PDA is going to go ballistic, right? It's suddenly everybody wants to be together, and now there's an appreciation of, what do you mean I can't go be with my church family? Now all of a sudden that's a big deal. Everybody would love to do it if they could. And then finally, I think that in my heart as a pastor, one of the things I fight within myself and I have to disciple people through is the issue of selfishness. And now everyone's in this mode of supporting one another. There's people that are wanting to make masks at home just so the hospitals had more. I know it wasn't working, but that sweet heart was there, right? And now all of a sudden, all these other companies are not concerned only about the bottom line. Now they're making ventilators for the government. And I mean, it's like everybody has made this big shift from me, to how do I love and protect other people? And so from a pastoral point of view, my heart is rich in this, and I can't tell you how thankful I am.
Yeah, I think one of the things that just has made me just so happy, mostly on Facebook, is I just see, and I really think that this will just help the church grow in general, is the amount that everybody's jumping on and offering what they have to offer. And it's not just leaders, it's not just staff or pastoral staff. It's everybody in the body. I mean, it's like, this is what I have to offer, and I'm going to put it out there. Within our Bridgeway community, we have um, people offering prayer on their Facebook. How can I pray for you today? Let me call you. Let me text you. Let's email prayer together. We've got people offering yoga. Moms who've been homeschool moms for years are helping all the moms that are suddenly homeschool moms that didn't know they needed to be homeschool moms. And so they're sharing resources, and they're putting them, how can I help? I had one mom that, she was putting the different things she didn't feel confident in tutoring her kids at, and people were chiming in. I'll help, let's exchange phone numbers. I'll tutor your kid in this. I'll tutor your kid in that. I mean, it's amazing the way that we're rallying together, and people are just putting themselves out there in leadership. And it's that beautiful picture of the body. I have this to offer. I have this to offer. I have this to offer. And look at how we're coming together, as opposed to, well, I'm going to wait and I'm going to follow the leader in that. And I don't feel like I have anything to offer. So I just feel like there's this new freedom of an ability to put ourselves out there for the unique skills and abilities that God's given us, and a sharing of resources that I just feel like is going to explode when we come back together. Because it's even a lot like what you talked about this weekend, Brian, and it's activating that potential that we have as believers. We all have potential. And we're just getting a really beautiful demonstration, I think, of that in a new way that we didn't have when we were all together in the building.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I certainly agree with you. And I've seen a lot of that same spirit. It's almost like, I think, to kind of touch on things that both of you have said. Lance, you talk about sort of the friendliness and kind of the togetherness and all that we're observing. It's almost like our natural, well, I don't know if it's natural, but our conditioned sort of suspicion of one another has dropped a little bit. In the sense that our posture towards one another is not as much one of suspicion, but is one that's kind of saying, hey, we're all. I mean, it's funny, even in my own neighborhood, which I have a decently friendly neighborhood anyway, and I'll go for walks with the boys, or I'll go for a run occasionally. And you pass people by, you give them a little wave or whatever, and even that experience, I feel like, has gotten richer since this has all started. That we smile and maybe chat with a stranger for a minute. And then I think, Heather, to your point, I mean, I think that's so cool that you brought that up, because you're absolutely right that there is this greater sense of, okay, I have something to bring to the table to be a blessing to others. Oh, and I have this area of lack in my life where all of a sudden people are saying, hey, I want help. Or they're saying, hey, I have something to offer. And you can say, all right, well, I need help in that area. And people are willing to give it. And you're right. It's like, that's like that. I think that's how God designed the body of Christ to work. And when that can happen, it obviously brings us closer together, and we're able to accomplish a whole lot more.
Yeah, and I think I see a new way that we're moving beyond kind of roles and positions. It's like, well, I can't do that because I'm not a leader, or, I can't do that because I'm not a pastor. And it's like, we've just kind of removed all those things. It's like, well, I can do that, or I need that. And there's just this new level of jumping in and being the body of Christ, which I think is how we were designed to be anyway. And it just
Yeah.
it tickles me to no end. I love it.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And Lance, anything else you wanted to add on that? I was going to move us on to kind of some other,
Yeah, no, we're good. Let's keep moving forward.
but wanted to check in. Is there anything else you wanted to add there? Cool. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to get into just talking through, okay, what are some very practical things that we can do to build community? Some of these are going to be extremely simple. Others may be a little bit more complex. Hopefully some of these are things you've kind of thought of already, and this can just be a little bit of an encouragement to you. And the number one thing, and this is going to be obvious, and we've talked about it already, but use technology, right? And I think it's important to recognize that kind of, I'm going to say two sort of opposite things. Number one, it's not as hard as you think it is, and that it is pretty simple most of the time. But then number two, it's not always going to work great, and that's all right too. Even tonight, we're mostly on YouTube tonight instead of Facebook because we had some connectivity issues. Or even earlier tonight, we did a family dinner with my family, my parents, my brother, and then my other brother and his girlfriend, all in different locations, having family dinner together, which, true confession, I thought that was a ridiculous idea to actually literally eat together, but it went out pretty well. And it was fun, right? And it was a great opportunity and a great way to connect. So I think to recognize the opportunity of technology, to know that if you take the time to learn how to use Zoom, learn how to use Google Meet, that opportunities exist to connect. And here's the crazy thing, and this relates to what was already shared, is I think so many of us, we're so much more open to connecting than we ordinarily are. Or maybe it's just we're more willing to make invitations. Like I'll give you a silly example. The other night, I got on a Zoom call with, there was probably 15 people from the fraternity that I was in college. It was a Christian fraternity. The guy that set it up graduated 3 years before I did. I don't think I've spoken to him since he graduated. We've been in touch through fantasy sports leagues and this and that. But there we are, like 15 of us on a Friday night, just shooting the breeze, literally all over the world, not even all just in the United States. And it's like, for that to happen, like that just would not have happened without all of this. And I could give so many other examples, and I would imagine the two of you have these as well. Just opportunities that you've had for connection because there's a greater openness to it. And I think it's really beautiful when we can take those opportunities. I mean, have you guys seen that kind of playing out in your life or other places kind of around the church?
Well, I think that I would love to hear, because I know Heather continues to have these incredible stories. She's kind of like the hub of all the coolness that happens at Bridgeway. But I would just say that, a lot of times, so my mom lives locally and she is a part of the church. She's on our prayer team. She works at the community closet. So she's involved in our church. And it's funny because you would assume that I see my mom, she's on my intercessor team. You would assume that I see my mom all the time because she lives just in the next town over. But really in this time, I didn't want her to go out. And so I did grocery shopping for her. I got a chance to go minister to her and set up stuff on her computer and set up stuff on her phone. And you know what I mean? So even in my own family, it keeps facilitating all these meaningful conversations. And I think that indeed, even out as you were talking about in society, when we take the dog for a walk, and when you're out and about, people all kind of feel like they have the same thing on their mind. And so people aren't afraid to go, hey, how you hanging in there? Right? Even if you don't know them, there's already an assumption you're going through a hard time like me, right? I mean, it's just a beautiful community thing. But I want to hear a little bit more from Miss Heather.
I think the creativity is just mind blowing. What people are learning to do virtually or through social distancing. There's a group of ladies just even today that decided to practice the thing that they were seeing on Facebook, where the moms were coming, backing their vans up. Have you guys seen this? Where they back their vans up and they open up the back and they basically share coffee together or, snacks, and they're all in the backs of their vans in a Starbucks parking lot or whatever, and just being social distancing, but being around one another as a creative way to meet. And people are doing all sorts of stuff like this. And I think it's the increased, kind of what you said, Brian, it's that increased level of intentionality that's making the time sweeter. It's almost like when you go without sugar for a long period of time and then you enter it back in, it's like, oh my gosh, this is so sweet. So it looks like we just left Brian. Hey.
Hey, well, Brian has left the planet, but that's all right. We're still going, Heather. Don't worry about it. Oh, he's back.
I'm back.
We thought maybe you were raptured, but
it was nice of the Holy Spirit to turn off your computer first.
Yeah, that was a little scary. The question we still on YouTube, but Heather, you keep talking. I'm going to figure that out.
I'll keep talking. So just the creativity, I think, has been really fun, and the intentionality. I think it's what you said. It's that ease, even on the sidewalk of, we're all in this together, and so we might as well connect in meaningful ways because we need it, and we're all recognizing that need, and I think it's driving a level of intentionality for meaningful connection that I think is really unique. Honestly, it's really unique to this time. That's kind of like you were saying in the beginning, Lance. We've just kind of been stripped away of some of the things that were distracting us. And we're being really reminded of what meaningful interaction, what meaningful connection looks like. Because we've had lots of connection prior to this, but I think what we're really seeing is that increase in the desire and then the creatively leaning into that desire for that deeper connection.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to highlight out was that when Brian was talking about technology, it's easier than you think. I never assumed that I would be able to navigate. Like, for example, when we're doing church, I have 3 devices running simultaneously while I'm also taking notes on the message and worshiping. So I'm watching YouTube, and then I have a separate whole thing open for Facebook, which is a separate thing open because we're all texting each other on the phones. So all the leadership is talking back and forth amongst each other. And so at the same time, I'm checking my email. And so you're doing this massive multitasking being at church. But the one thing I do want to encourage everyone, and I know it's already been said, but I want to highlight it again. It's okay for all this stuff to be a little bit awkward because it's all new to us. I was thinking about how awkward it is to get ready for the day because in general, sweatpants are awesome. And I realized even if we're on a video, like I almost feel like, oh shoot, I'm going to be on video. I got to go do my hair, right? Which sounds totally stupid. But here's the funny thing about it. I'm like, man, this is a pain. Well, wait a second. Didn't I do my hair every day when I saw people? And so it's like we're in a different cycle. And so it's like, oh, it's extra work. No, it's not. It's just different work. And one of the things that I used to really not like about the phone was that I'm a big people reader and I work off a lot of nonverbal cues, and I can't do that on the phone. And so it makes me feel very uncomfortable. Well, one of the neat things about technology of having at least some visual is that you get a sense of their eyes, you get a sense of whether or not they're nodding in agreement, you get a sense. So a lot of that even makes it easier. But I do think that we all have a big learning curve. And if you go, well, I don't know if I want to get into a group where it's online because I'm probably going to mess it up. But okay, no big deal. Please don't allow that to stop you from trying because we're all figuring this thing out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's really an advantage to that too, because we're all learning it together. So there's almost like this common, I keep telling anybody who wants to lead a group that, if they're connecting with me, I'm like, just lean into the awkwardness. People are going to talk over each other. We're going to fumble. There's going to be silences. And then at the end, we're all going to laugh about it because we all don't know what we're doing all at the same time. So, there's almost like this extra measure of grace that we can, like now is the time to lead something virtually because nobody else knows what they're doing either. So right. It is the time to jump in and fumble together because what you get at the end of it is worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And so, Lance, to your point, it's funny, I've read all these things online now from like different people who like they work from home regularly and they're like sharing their tips, and they all say like dress like you're going to the office kind of thing. Because like you said, sweatpants are awesome. So even like literally this morning, I got dressed, and I would say it was like for a Sunday morning, pretty casual, but certainly for hanging around the house, it was pretty formal. And my wife goes, "Well, what are you all dressed up for?" And I'm like, "Well, they say dress like you're working, so that's what I'm trying to do." And I was working, just obviously not, in front of people. So I'm trying to keep that mentality. But then, and this is just stupid, but one thing that makes it extra challenging is in my normal routine, I don't shower at home. I shower at the gym. So normally I'm just like sweats and get out the door and I'll take care of this later. Now it's like, anyway, first world problems. But so I want to talk about something that actually matters and not my morning routine. And because here's sort of an interesting element to all of this is that, and I'm going to use an analogy here. I felt like the first like day or two that kids were out of school, it was this big panic of like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with our kids? And now I feel like I'm to the point where I might lose my mind if I get one more idea for what to do with my kids. Like there is this like huge generation sharing all of their best ideas, which is a huge sense of need to an oversaturation. Now, I think that when it comes to our social connections and I mean social, both the casual social connections and those deeper relationships, we hit our moment of being very isolated, of having a real lack in that area. And what that does is that creates sort of a gap time. Now, the ability to meet person's been taken away, the ability to do a lot of things in our normal routine has been taken away. So now there's all this time that is now available. Now, what happens, obviously, that time gets filled by something. It doesn't just go away. So I don't think any of us, if this goes on for a while, I don't think any of us are going to be sitting here in 3, 4 weeks saying, oh my gosh, I'm so bored. I have nothing to do. Or any of these conversations are going to be happening about, like, oh gosh, what do we do in quarantine? Because we'll have just figured it out. We will have filled that time with something. So I think what we need to be conscious of is that we're in this really important period of the next. I mean, I think we're in it now, and it's maybe lasting maybe through the week, where we're establishing new routines. And I think it's fine to have some passive entertainment, find a new show to watch, whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. It's fine to have things where we're just doing things on our own. But I think we need to be conscious about establishing new routines that involve connecting with other people. And you can get creative. I mean, I heard, a buddy of mine said that he and his parents played Settlers of Catan with 2 computers and another one with a camera on the board. No, I don't play the game, but that sort of a thing. We can get creative. And what I think we need to be careful to avoid is, and I'm just making this term up, but what I would call passive isolation, where active isolation is one thing, where we're deciding maybe we're introverted, maybe we just don't want to be around people, or we just say, I don't want to be around people. I'm consciously withdrawing. I think passive isolation is more along the lines of all sorts of other bad decisions we make in our lives where, like, well, shoot, I didn't plan to put on 20 pounds, but I just made a series of not great decisions and here I am. And I think passive isolation can be the same way, where we say, well, I'm not trying to isolate, but what I'm doing is I'm making small decisions that are isolating me more and more. I'm making small decisions where I'm not actively reaching out or actively putting myself in community. And now, gosh, I'm in this place where I never intended to be. We're now a month into this social distancing thing. I'm feeling very alone, and that's not what I wanted. So I think we need to be very conscious to be careful to guard against passive isolation. Lance, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I think that's really, really smart. We do live in an era where we have some real helps in this area. One of the reasons why we isolate many times in our lives is we're afraid of rejection. And if we're trying to be intentional, there is a little bit of a resistance that says, yeah, but what if I want to reach out and they don't want me to reach out? One of the cool things about our current technology is we have ability to send out little practice balloons, and they're usually in the form of text. So you can text somebody a little tiny phrase and find out whether or not they want to connect without feeling super rejected, because it's a different type of medium. It doesn't demand on them. They can get back to it whenever they need to. I think we also have the ability that, let's say you had something on your heart and it was a little bit more deep and you needed to think about it. We have a technology that allows an email to be able to be crafted over time, prayed over, and then sent. So once again, we have so many different mediums of communication that there shouldn't be a block that keeps you isolated if you want to be intentional. That was my thought.
Right. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right about that. Heather, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I do think we need to be intentional about our relationships. I would argue the same level of intensity, if not more, than we have when we're outside of our homes, you know. But and I always encourage people. I mean, we have groups at Bridgeway that people can join if they don't have a healthy set of networked of relationships. We have places where people can plug in. If you're watching this and you're interested in joining a group, we have stuff open right now. You can go on our website. We've got virtual discussion groups that are forming around the sermon. They're all new, so it's not like you're walking into a group, well, logging into a group of people that that all know each other. We've got classes starting, so there's lots of opportunities for you to be intentional, even if you don't have a strong network of relationships now. This can be your opportunity that you start that. And we're really excited about being able to offer that. And we would love for you to join us at Bridgeway. But I always encourage people to start with the networks of relationships they have. Even if it's, just take a few minutes and think, okay, who would I really like to get to know better? Who would I like to spend more time with? And I mean, I love what you said, Lance, about, well, we've got to date a little bit. It's like, hey, would you like to do this? I'm not going to take it personally if you don't, and I really encourage people to do more than one person. That honestly, groups of 2, 3, 4 is a great size, because then if one or two people can't make it, you still have, you've still got something that's going on. And it can be as simple as reading a book together. I mean, people have got some extra time on their hands. People are picking up new books and intentionally reading something. Super easy. Just grab 2 or 3 more people once a week, an hour, you're going to talk through the book. There is that level of an intentionality. But I always encourage people to start with the people they already have, and just think, who would you like to get to know better? Who would you like to do something else with to take that relationship to the next level?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And that's really, really, really good advice. And I think when we start to think of that hopefully some options open up for us. Now, there's another side of this that I think is important that we recognize too. And that is that for a lot of us going through this time, it's going to create a lot of different needs. It just is. It's going to, and we could spend a long time going through all the different types of needs that are going to be created by this scenario. I mean, even some people who just very, Lance, like you're talking about with your mom, she needs her groceries delivered, right? My parents need the same thing, right? That these types of needs arise. And it's important that we are aware enough of what our needs are that we can communicate them appropriately when needed. Because what happens is, so often whether it's a shame thing, whether it's I don't want to bother people thing, is that we keep the needs that we have sort of stuffed inside. And then all of a sudden, when it becomes a crisis, now we're just angry that it seems like nobody cared. So it's important that we're able to, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's your church. I mean, like in our case, our care and compassion department has all sorts of practical help and resources, from chaplain care to grocery delivery and Stephen ministers, and all sorts of different care opportunities that exist. It's important that we're aware enough of our needs that we can communicate them. And I think a lot of what we've tried to do at Bridgeway is set up what we would call spans of care, right? Where different people can be cared for by a missional community or by a group that they're associated with. But I think we just need to be aware enough in this time to not allow any sort of shame or whatever else hide us from or keep us from sharing our needs, because I think, as you two have stated in some different ways, I think society-wide, we're as willing to help out one another as we've ever been at this point, right? But it can be hard to help when you don't know what the needs are, right?
Yeah, so if you can share a little bit with us, Pastor Brian, what you know about what we do have available. Like, for example, I just got a notification on my email, actually just this morning from PG&E saying, hey, if you're going through hardship, there's something there for you. We talked a little bit in our last broadcast about some mortgage help that was going for 3 months. So there's a lot of different things out there, which I encourage people, if you have that information and it's double checked and legit, you can certainly help other people with that. But our own care and compassion department have been doing all kinds of stuff. And can you share any more details on that, Pastor Brian?
I mean, yeah, I guess all I would leave it at this point is to say that if you're in a place where you're thinking, gosh, that utilizing the care and compassion department at my church would really be helpful to me, I could really
Right.
use someone to come alongside and help me with some things. Uh, Literally, that's what the department does. So
Right.
don't feel like you're a burden to that. They exist to meet these types of needs. So if you go to our website, bridgeway.church, you'll see right there on the front page 4 big boxes. One of them says care and compassion. And if you click that box, that'll lead you to a page that'll show you how to get connected with the department. You can learn about the resources that are available, and we really want to just encourage you to check that out and be aware of it if it would be of use to you. Because again, that's what it's there. That's why the department exists. And as much as we try really hard to be proactive and to reach out and to check in with people, the fact is it's just impossible for us to know about needs until we're made aware of them, and we want to be made aware of them so that we can help. And then there's one other element to this. If I can kind of flip back to a different side, is I think that as we're seeking to maintain and establish community in this time, it's important that those of us who maybe are not in a position of desperation, that we recognize ways we can utilize the resources we have to continue to be a blessing. I know that, man, I'm concerned for all sorts of organizations in the midst of all of this, and certainly as a staff member at Bridgeway, I think about the implications of Bridgeway. But gosh, I think about smaller churches, especially, that are just running on such a thin margin. It's just like, gosh, I wish I could get in front of their congregations and be like, please make sure you keep up with your giving, because your pastor and your people need your support to be able to keep going. I look at organizations that are doing such great work all over the world, that so many of us, we give money to, and we support in some different ways. And I think it's really important that we figure out, okay, what does it look like for us to maintain our giving? If you call Bridgeway home, your giving is a big part of what we're able to do. So we would ask that you do your best to maintain your giving there. I think even as we're looking at, we're trying to think creatively about this in our family of like, okay, businesses in our area are struggling. How can we just, and we're trying to be careful financially as well, but it's like, how can we be a blessing and kind of, use the services of local businesses that we know are going to be in a tough spot. I think those are some very practical ways that when we're not in that place of lack, that we can look outward and say, okay, how can I help? And I think there's really an opportunity there for the body of Christ, for those of us who call ourselves Christians, to really be a blessing to the world in the way that when, that we're able to live out generosity, even in the midst of a time where things are becoming a little bit more scarce.
Yeah, let me just add to that. Once again, technology can be your friend on this one. I said I was posting out on, I don't know if it was Facebook or YouTube on services last night, and it got to the giving portion, and I said, I think I have a check sitting here, because I've always been there in the office to drop it off. Like my routine was either Susie put it in the offering basket, or I took it to work. And now I'm not going into work, and I was like, we don't have, I've never done the text giving. I've never done the
Have you heard of mobile giving, Lance?
Yeah, well, it's totally. Well, here's my point. My point is that all three of us have access to different budget pieces, and watching how the generosity of one goes and directly ministers over to this group over here, where we become kind of a distribution house and we help vet different things. So once again, We do want you to be generous in whatever way the Lord lays on your heart. But it is important that if Bridgeway is constantly hearing needs, we want to be able to make sure that we can do that. So we might as well keep up with that for sure.
Yep, absolutely. So Heather, I want to go to you now. Wondering if you can maybe just share maybe some stories, and you can get as specific you want to get of ways that you're seeing missional and other communities at Bridgeway get creative about maintaining community in the midst of this kind of crazy time we're in.
Yeah, I thought of a couple of them, which some I've kind of mentioned a little bit. I love, some of you know Ariana from our worship team. She's started doing morning worship every morning on her Facebook Live at 8:30. If you're not one of her Facebook friends, she requests. She's welcome and open to anybody that wants to worship with her. And I've seen several other of our Bridgeway worship leaders that are in missional communities offering their their guitar. We have a guitar player in our missional community, so we tried worship via Zoom. And so there's just, that's a really neat way that people are getting creative, and just logging on and worshiping together in a way that I never would have thought, through Facebook Live. We've got others in our church that are offering, yoga and different things like that online. There's a gal that I've been logging on with her and praying. She prays live in the morning as well. And I've just really enjoyed that. And, people are interacting with her and we're praying together over Facebook. I mean, it's just, never would have thought that before. There's people doing creative things. One of the members of our church body was telling me how they're already starting to plan a progressive, it's like a virtual progressive Easter dinner where they're all like preparing one part of the meal and leaving it on the doorstep. And then people are coming by and picking it up, and then they're all going to share an Easter meal virtually together. I'm like, this is so creative. But they're trying, they're just trying to see fun ways to still kind of keep that sense of normalcy, but then be together. And so, I mean, those are some of them off the top of my head. I'm trying to think of other ones. Oh, I've seen people do, and participated in myself in a little Friday night appetizer happy hour kind of thing, where we're gathering some families around a table and we're each putting out food, and it's just casual and fun, and people playing games over over virtually, like you had said, Lance. I think people are, and one of the other things that I really enjoyed at the beginning of all this, when we were trying to get as many missional communities and path tables and groups onto Zoom that wanted to go, that first week that it all happened, we had another gentleman in our congregation who, like you had said, Brian, he worked from Zoom all the time. And so he offered just a free live Q&A training session that he put together, a full 1 hour, just to help whoever wanted that was leading groups figure out Zoom. So it's, again, that concept of, this is what I'm good at. And people said, I need help. I'm not good at this. And just really sharing resources back and forth to kind of maintain connection. I'm sure you guys have heard of some different things too.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, and that hearing you talk about virtual happy hour, I mean, I was telling my parents about Zoom, which my dad has used it for work. My mom hadn't heard of it, but now they're telling me that they get together with other couples and have a glass of wine in the evening over Zoom. And I'm like, this is great. Like, it's just amazing that if you think creatively, the ability that we have to connect, and it's like, I don't know, in quote unquote normal times, like, how crazy does a progressive dinner in front of your computer sound? Like, that's just weird. But in this time, it's awesome and it's amazing, and it builds community and connection, which I think is wonderful. So I think as I'm trying to sort of distill down everything we've talked about, and then kind of, Lance, I'll go to you and see if you have any kind of closing thoughts. I feel like just a few big themes that have emerged are number one, get creative. Just get creative about what the opportunities that are there, and how you can leverage technology. I think number two is be proactive, realizing that people will never be more open to different types of social interaction than perhaps we are right now. And then number three, I guess, is similar to be proactive, is just be conscious about communicating either the needs that you have or the services you can offer. And I think as we do that, we're able to build community around those things, and it can be pretty powerful. Lance, any final thoughts for us as we start to close it out here?
Sure. Just a couple follow-ups with what you were just saying. First of all, Heather mentioned that Ariana was doing worship. There's a lot of people that crave that. She's one of our worship leaders that are up on the stage normally at Bridgeway. Her name is Ariana Coburn, Coburn. If you wanted to look in and do a little request on Facebook to see if you can be part of that 8:30 morning worship, and Ariana, Ariana. The other thing was a couple quick things on Zoom. If you've never used it before, it's an application you can download onto your computer or onto your phone. And you basically get a little number, a dial-in number, and it says you're automatically in a meeting. And it starts doing a bunch of the other stuff for you, especially if someone else is managing it. So joining a Zoom is actually very easy. Don't be afraid of it. There's a couple etiquette things on there. Is it will feel more jumpy unless you mute when you're not talking. So like, for example, even amongst the three of us, we're muting each time that we stop talking. And that allows background noise not to jam up, because the way that Zoom is designed is it wants to point the camera for everyone at the real person who's talking, but it can't differentiate whether or not a dog barking behind you is supposed to be on camera or not. So there's other things in terms of just realize you're on camera, but other than that, we're all kind of feeling our way through it. And then the last thing that I thought of, speaking of community and technology, is today is Bishop Parnell Loveley's birthday. Bishop is, I won't tell you how old he's turning, but I'll tell you, man, that guy looks good. That's all I'm trying to tell you. Anyway, he is one of our beloved, we're going to call him our beloved family member. And anyway, it's his birthday. So if you're on Facebook and you're friends with Bishop, by all means, fire him out. Something about a virtual hug or loving on him. I got a chance to just chat with him earlier today, and he's doing wonderful. So once again, we have connections all over the place. I'm having other leaders contact me from other churches, and it's very unusual. So whatever your church you go to, bless your staff, bless your pastoral leadership, and bless your volunteers. They're the ones that do all the heavy lifting. So anyway, that was my final thoughts. Anything from you, Heather?
Yep.
I think I just say, dive in. I mean, it just, we've already said it, but I just think reach out. You know, Brian, you've been encouraging people to take the initiative, to not wait for somebody else to take the initiative. And I think that's just really important, because we're all going to have good days where we're reaching out like crazy. And then we're going to have days where we feel a little blah and discouraged. And we really need somebody to reach out to us. So I just think this is the time where we need to just assume the best about people and do our best to be the initiators, even if that's not necessarily natural for us, that we just all need to kind of lean into our inner extrovert and go for it.
Yep. Absolutely. Well said. And hey, as y'all are doing this, feel free to email any one of the three of us with stories of successes or failures of just things that you've tried, because we love hearing about that stuff, and it makes us happy and it brightens our day. So, all right. Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you to Lance and Heather for being part of the program tonight. Thanks to all of you for watching. We're going to have video content most days this week on our Facebook page, provided the technology works okay. Tomorrow, I'll be talking at noon with our soul care director, Melissa Bergen, about how do you keep your marriage healthy when you can't go anywhere. So make sure you check that out at noon, and then we'll be back here next Sunday night at 8:30 and a whole bunch between now and then. So we love you. We'll hope to see you in person real soon.